The sky above Sanctuary Prime had turned the color of blood. Fires burned across the capital city, spreading from building to building like a disease. The people ran through the streets, their feathered bodies trembling with fear, their large eyes filled with tears. They had never known war. They had never needed to fight. For thousands of years, they had lived in peace, building beautiful cities and creating art that other species traveled across the galaxy to see. Now the hive swarm had come to destroy everything. High Arbiter stood at the window of the council tower, watching his world burn. He was old, even by standards, and his once bright feathers had faded to gray. Behind him, the other council members argued and cried but said nothing. What was there to say? The swarm had already consumed 12 civilizations in the outer rim. Everyone knew they were coming. Everyone had hoped someone else would stop them. No one did. The first swarm ships had appeared in orbit 3 days ago. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars. 18,000 vessels, each one filled with millions of insect-like soldiers bred only to kill and consume. They had no military. They had a small defense force, but those ships had been destroyed in the first hour. "The shields will fail soon," said Advisor, his voice shaking. "Perhaps we should surrender. Perhaps they will show mercy." Did not turn around. The swarm does not know mercy. They do not want our surrender. They want our biomass. They will consume our bodies to create more soldiers. That is all we are to them. Food. A young council member named Vila stepped forward. Her feathers were bright blue, and despite her fear, there was fire in her eyes. "We sent messages to the Galactic Federation. Surely they will help us. We are member species. We have rights." Finally turned to face the council. His expression was tired and sad. "I received their response 1 hour ago. They have classified our situation as a regional conflict. They will not intervene. The Trade Confederacy calculated that saving us would cost more than we are worth. The Empire said they would send observers to document our extinction for historical purposes." The room fell silent. Somewhere in the distance, an explosion shook the tower. "So we die," Advisor said quietly. "We simply wait here and die." Walked slowly to the communication console at the center of the room. His old hands moved across the controls with purpose. "There is one more thing we can try. It is foolish. It is desperate. But I will not let our people fade into darkness without screaming into the void." "What are you doing?" Vila asked. "I am sending a distress signal, not to the Federation, not to any government that has already abandoned us. I am sending it everywhere, every frequency, every corner of charted space, and uncharted space as well." Advisor's feathers puffed up with shock. "Uncharted space? You mean the restricted sectors, the quarantine zones?" "Yes. That is madness. Those zones are restricted for a reason. The species there are dangerous beyond measure. They are." Activated the beacon. A soft hum filled the room as the signal began broadcasting. "We are already dying, old friend. What more can they do to us that the swarm has not already done? Perhaps no one will answer. Perhaps we will die alone, but I will not go quietly." The signal shot out from Sanctuary Prime at the speed of light, carrying with it the desperate hope of a dying world. 12 hours later and 3,000 light-years away, a young woman named sat at her communication station aboard the human carrier Eternal Dawn. She was 24 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The night shift was usually quiet, but never relaxed. Space was dangerous, and she had learned early that the universe did not care about schedules. Her console beeped. At first she thought it was just background noise from a distant pulsar, but when she adjusted the frequency she heard something that made her blood run cold. It was a voice, many voices, crying, begging. The universal translator struggled to keep up with the flood of words. "Please, anyone, our world is burning, our children are dying, we beg you, someone please help us." His hands froze over her console. She had heard distress signals before. Pirates sometimes faked them to lure ships into traps, But this was different. This was real. She could hear the explosions in the background. She could hear the screams. She recorded the signal and ran to the bridge. Fleet Admiral was a man of 60 years, though he looked older. His hair was white, and his face was lined with scars from battles most people had forgotten. He commanded the Fifth Fleet of the Human Confederation, and he had spent 30 years fighting to keep humanity safe in a galaxy that feared and hated them. When played the signal for him, he listened without speaking. His officers gathered around, their faces growing grim as the recording continued. "How many people?" asked when it ended. "They have a population of approximately 4 billion, answered. "The signal indicates the hive swarm is conducting full planetary assault. Based on swarm behavior patterns, they will strip the entire planet of biological material within 72 hours. No survivors." Looked at the star map on the main screen. The red lines marking human territory were clear and bold. Beyond those lines lay the Galactic Federation space, the people who had locked humanity away in a quarantine zone because they were afraid of what humans could do. "The Federation will not help them?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. The signal states that all requests for assistance have been." Commander, second in command, stepped forward. She was younger than the Admiral but just as experienced. "Sir, if we cross into Federation space without permission, there will be consequences. They might use it as an excuse to attack us. We could be starting a war." Was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the voices in the signal. He thought about the children. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that called them monsters. "Get me the other fleet admirals," he said finally. "All of them, priority 1 communication." "Sir." Turned to face his crew. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like hope. "Someone is asking for help, and we are going to answer." 5 fleet admirals of the Human Confederation had not gathered in the same place for over 20 years. The last time was during the border crisis, when 3 alien empires had tried to push humanity back into their quarantine zone. That meeting had lasted 2 hours and resulted in a war that lasted 6 months. Humanity won, but the galaxy learned nothing except to fear them even more. Now they gathered again, not in person but through holographic projection, their images flickering aboard the flagship Unbroken Will. Admiral stood at the center of the command bridge, surrounded by the ghosts of his peers. Admiral was a thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight braid. She commanded the Second Fleet and was known throughout human space as the greatest strategic mind of her generation. She never lost a battle because she never fought one she had not already won in her mind. Admiral was the opposite. He was a large man with a face like rough stone and eyes that burned with constant anger. His Third Fleet was called the Hammer because that was how he fought. He struck hard, struck fast, and did not stop until the enemy was dust. Admiral was small and quiet, but her Fourth Fleet kept every other fleet running. She managed logistics, supplies, fuel, ammunition, and the 1,000 other things that armies needed to survive. Without her, the Confederation would have collapsed decades ago. Admiral Myra was the youngest of the 5, only 45 years old, but she had earned her place through blood and fire. She commanded the Marine Corps, the ground forces that every enemy feared most. Her soldiers were the ones who boarded enemy ships and took planets with nothing but their weapons and their will. Told them everything. He played the distress signal. He showed them the tactical data. He explained what they faced and what the galaxy had chosen to do about it. When he finished, there was silence. Admiral spoke first. "The numbers are not good. 18,000 swarm vessels against our combined strength of 1,700. Even with our technological advantage, we will take heavy losses." "Losses?" Admiral growled. "We will take losses sitting here doing nothing. At least out there our people will die for something." "I am not suggesting we do nothing," replied calmly. I am stating facts. If we do this, we must understand the cost. Admiral checked her data pad. I can have supply ships ready within 4 hours. Fuel, ammunition, medical supplies. If we are going to fight, my people will make sure we can fight for as long as needed. Admiral Myra had been quiet, but now she leaned forward. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement. My Marines have trained their entire lives for something like this. They sign up because they want to protect people. They want to be heroes. If we leave those aliens to die when we could have helped, what are we? What does it mean to be human if we only fight for ourselves? Nodded slowly. That is the question, is it not? For 100 years, the galaxy has called us monsters. They put lines around our territory and told us to stay inside. They teach their children that humans are dangerous animals that must be contained. And we have done nothing to change their minds because we have never been given the chance. He looked at each of his fellow admirals in turn. This is our chance, not to prove that we are not dangerous. We are dangerous. We are exactly what they fear. But we can show them that being dangerous is not the same as being evil. We can show them what we choose to do with our strength. Admiral slammed his fist on his command console. Then let us stop talking and start moving. Every minute we waste, more of those bird people die. Agreed, said, but we must be smart about this. I will coordinate the fleet formations. We will need screening ships to protect the carriers, heavy hitters to break their main line, and fast attack groups to prevent them from surrounding us. I will have my Marines ready for ground assault and boarding actions, Myra added. The swarm likes to fight in close quarters. They think it gives them an advantage. They have never fought us. Raised his hand. Then it is decided. All fleets will rally at Point Echo in 6 hours. From there, we make best speed to Sanctuary Prime. We will cross into Federation space without permission. We will engage the swarm without authorization. And if the galaxy wants to punish us for saving 4 billion lives, then let them try. The admirals disconnected one by one, returning to their own ships to give orders. Within an hour, the largest movement of human military power in history began. Ships launched from stations across human space. Destroyers screamed out of dock, their engines burning hot. Carriers loaded fighters and bombers as fast as their crews could work. Dreadnoughts, the massive warships that served as the backbone of human fleets, powered up weapons that had not been used in decades. Aboard the destroyer Moonless Night, Captain gathered his crew in the main hall. He was young for a captain, only 28, but he had proven himself in the frontier wars. His ship was small but fast, and his crew trusted him with their lives. You all know where we are going, said, his voice steady. You all know what we will face. The swarm outnumbers us 10 to 1. Many of us will not come home. I will not lie to you about that. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. Some were scared, some were excited, all of them were listening. But somewhere out there, billions of people are dying. They sent a message into the darkness begging anyone to help them. No one answered. No one except us. Today we show the galaxy who we really are. Not monsters, not animals, humans. And humans do not abandon the helpless. A young officer named raised her hand. Captain, what if the Federation tries to stop us? Smiled, and there was no humor in it. Then they will learn what the swarm is about to learn. You do not get between a human and someone who needs saving. At Rally Point Echo, the fleets gathered. 1,700 ships hung in the darkness of space, their running lights blinking like stars. It was the most powerful force humanity had ever assembled, and it was about to fly into the heart of enemy territory. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Unbroken Will and looked out at his armada. He thought about Earth, that he had left as a young man. He thought about the Exodus, when humanity had fled into space because they had no other choice. He thought about every insult, every fear, every locked door the galaxy had thrown at his people. All ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel, set course for Sanctuary Prime. maximum speed. Today, we remind the universe why they fear us, and tomorrow we give them a reason to respect us instead. 1,700 ships turned as one and jumped to hyperspace. The Armada was coming, and nothing in the galaxy would stop it. The Hive swarm detected the approaching human fleet 17 hours before it arrived. There was not a single creature but a collective intelligence spread across millions of bodies, all thinking as one. It processed information faster than any computer and had conquered 12 civilizations without ever knowing defeat. When it calculated the numbers, it felt something that might have been amusement if it had understood such emotions. 1,700 ships against 18,000. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was certain. They allocated 3,000 vessels to intercept the humans while the rest continued harvesting the planet below. That was its first mistake. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a wave of steel and fire. At the front came the dreadnoughts, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. Behind them came the carriers, their fighter bays already open, small craft pouring out like angry insects. And weaving between the larger ships came the destroyers, fast and deadly, their pilots hungry for battle. On the bridge of the moonless night, Captain watched the tactical display with cold focus. The swarm ships were moving to intercept, their organic hulls pulsing with strange life. They looked like giant insects, all angles and spines and mandibles large enough to crush smaller vessels. "They are not taking us seriously," said Lieutenant, reading the enemy formations. "They have only sent a fraction of their fleet to meet us." "Good," replied. "Let them underestimate us. It will make the lesson more memorable." Admiral's voice came through the fleet channel, calm and steady as always. "All ships, this is. The enemy thinks we are weak because we are few. Show them what humans do when someone threatens the innocent. All weapons free. Make them remember this day forever." The first volley of human weapons fire crossed the void like 1,000 suns. Plasma cannons, rail guns, missile swarms, and directed energy beams tore into the swarm formation. Ships that had conquered worlds exploded in seconds, their crews vaporized before they could understand what was happening. The swarm tried to return fire, but human targeting systems were too fast. Every shot the swarm fired was either dodged or intercepted. Human pilots flew their ships through patterns that should have been impossible, their bodies able to withstand acceleration that would have killed any other species. Captain pushed the moonless night into the center of the battle, weaving between enemy ships like a dancer. His weapons officer, a young woman named Sara, fired with perfect accuracy, each shot finding a weak point in swarm armor. "Enemy carrier on our port side," called the sensor operator. "They are launching fighters." Smiled. "Good, more targets." The moonless night spun and dove, its guns blazing. Swarm fighters died by the dozens, their pilots unable to match human reflexes. Within minutes, the carrier was alone and exposed. Did not hesitate. He drove his ship straight at the enemy, firing everything he had, and the carrier broke apart in a ball of flame. In space, the human fleet carved through the swarm like a knife through paper. But Admiral knew this was only the beginning. The real fight was on the planet below. Admiral Myra stood in the drop bay of the carrier Valor's Edge, surrounded by 2,000 of her best Marines. They wore powered armor that made them stronger, faster, and harder to kill. Each suit could survive in vacuum, shrug off small arms fire, and punch through walls. Inside those suits were men and women who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Sergeant checked her rifle one more time. She was 31 years old and had served for 12 of those years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and alien raiders, but she had never faced the swarm before. No human had. "Listen up," Admiral Myra called out, her voice cutting through the noise of the bay. "The swarm has ground forces all over the capital city. They are rounding up civilians and taking them to processing centers. You all know what that means. Once someone goes into those centers, they do not come out. She paused, letting the words sink in. Our mission is simple. Kill every swarm soldier we find. Protect every civilian we can reach. Do not stop until the job is done or you are dead. Are there any questions? Sergeant raised her hand. Ma'am, what are our rules of engagement? Myra's smile was cold. There are no rules. The swarm does not surrender. They do not negotiate. They only kill. So we kill them first, faster and harder. Now get to your drop pods. We launch in 5 minutes. The drop was violent. Drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing red. Swarm anti-air weapons tried to shoot them down, but human countermeasures were too advanced. Most of the pods made it through. Sergeant's pod hit the ground hard enough to crack stone. She was out before the dust settled, her rifle up and scanning. Around her, the city was a nightmare. Buildings burned. Bodies lay in the streets, and everywhere she looked there were swarm soldiers. They were tall, over 2 meters, with hard shells and 4 arms that ended in blades sharp enough to cut through metal. Their heads were filled with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked with hungry anticipation. One of them saw and charged. She put 3 rounds through its face before it took 2 steps. The body hit the ground and slid to a stop at her feet. More were coming. Squad, form up on me, she ordered through her helmet radio. We move toward the city center. Kill everything that is not human or... Private, the youngest member of her squad, appeared at her side. His armor was already stained with alien blood. Sergeant, there are thousands of them. Then we better get started, replied. Move out. The battle for Sanctuary Prime had begun in earnest. In the streets, human marines fought room to room, building to building. The swarm had numbers, but humans had fury. Every dead civilian they found made them angrier. Every child's body made them fight harder. Captain and the Moonless Knight continued their dance in orbit, destroying enemy ships one after another. Admiral coordinated the fleet from the Unbroken Will, his calm voice guiding 1,700 ships through chaos. Admiral led his Hammer fleet in a brutal frontal assault that shattered the swarm main line. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The felt something new. It was not amusement anymore. It was not confidence. For the first time in its existence, the hive swarm felt fear. These humans were not like any species it had faced before. They did not break. They did not run. They just kept coming, wave after wave of death wrapped in steel and rage. By the 6th hour of battle, the swarm had lost 2,000 ships. By the 10th hour, they had lost 5,000, and still the humans fought on. They made a decision. It would commit everything. It would crush these with pure numbers if nothing else worked. Every swarm ship turned toward the human fleet, and the real battle began. The next 12 hours were the longest in human history. When the full swarm fleet turned to face them, the battle changed from a fight into a war of survival. 18,000 ships against 1,700 meant that every human vessel faced 10 enemies at once. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, and no one coming to help. Admiral stood at the center of the Unbroken Will's bridge, his voice never wavering even as reports of destruction flooded in from across the fleet. Ships were dying. His people were dying, but they were not dying for nothing. Third Fleet reports heavy losses on the left flank, called the communications officer. Admiral requests permission to pull back and regroup. Replied, tell to hold the line. If the left flank collapses, the carriers will be exposed. We cannot lose the carriers. Lieutenant, who had received the original distress signal, worked at her station without rest. She coordinated rescue operations, redirected medical ships, and kept track of every fallen vessel. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. In the chaos of battle, heroes emerged. Lieutenant served aboard the carrier Eternal Dawn, the same ship where had first heard the cry for help. Was a pilot who had been grounded due to an injury, forced to serve in the operations center instead of the cockpit where she belonged. She watched her fellow pilots launch wave after wave against the swarm, watched them die, and felt useless. Then the Eternal Dawn took a critical hit. A swarm command vessel broke through the defensive screen and launched a direct assault on the carrier. Its boarding pods attached to the hull, and alien soldiers began cutting their way inside. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, but knew what that would mean. The Eternal Dawn carried 300 wounded soldiers in its medical bay. They could not be moved in time. If the ship fell, they would all die. Made her choice without hesitation. She ran to the bridge, took control of the dying ship, and aimed it directly at the swarm command vessel. "All hands, this is Lieutenant," she announced over the intercom. "I am initiating ramming maneuver. All evacuation pods launch now. Get our people out." The captain tried to stop her, but locked the controls. She watched through the main window as the swarm ship grew larger and larger. She thought about her family back home. She thought about the wounded soldiers who would now have time to escape. She thought about the children who might live because of what she was about to do. "For humanity," she whispered. The Eternal Dawn hit the swarm command vessel at full speed. Both ships vanished in an explosion that could be seen from the planet's surface. Lieutenant was gone, but she had taken an enemy command ship with her, disrupting swarm coordination across an entire sector. Captain saw the explosion from the bridge of the moonless night. He did not have time to mourn. His own ship was surrounded by 12 swarm destroyers, each one trying to tear his vessel apart. "Engineering, I need more power to the forward shields," he ordered. "Captain, if we redirect any more power, we will lose weapons," the engineer responded. "Then we lose weapons. I need those shields to hold." The moonless night twisted and turned, trying to escape the trap, but there were too many enemies. Hits began landing, each one shaking the ship. Fires broke out on multiple decks. Hull breaches sucked crew members into the void. Lieutenant clung to her console as another explosion rocked the bridge. "Captain, we cannot take much more of this." Looked at his crew, at the people who had followed him into hell. "Then we take as many of them with us as we can. All hands, prepare for emergency ramming procedures." But before he could give the final order, help arrived. Admiral's flagship, the Iron Hammer, smashed through the swarm formation like its name suggested. Heavy cannons tore through enemy ships, creating a path for the moonless night to escape. "Get out of there, Captain," his voice growled through the radio. "You have done enough. Fall back to the carrier group for repairs." Wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight, but he looked at his wounded ship and his exhausted crew. "Understood, Admiral." Moonless night falling back. On the ground, the battle was even more brutal. Sergeant had been fighting for 16 hours without rest. Her squad had been reduced from 12 soldiers to 4. They had saved hundreds of civilians, guiding them to evacuation points and defending them against swarm assaults. But now they were trapped. A hospital stood behind them, filled with over 200 children and their caregivers. In front of them, a seemingly endless wave of swarm soldiers approached. There was nowhere to run. "Sergeant, we should fall back," Private said, his voice trembling. "We cannot hold this position." Looked back at the hospital. Through the windows she could see small faces pressed against the glass, watching with terrified eyes. They were counting on her. They had no one else. "No," she said firmly. "We hold here, no matter what comes." The first wave hit them like a storm, and her squad fired until their rifles overheated, then switched to sidearms. When the sidearms ran dry, they fought with knives and fists. Swarm soldiers fell by the dozens, but more kept coming. Private went down with a blade through his shoulder. Corporal dragged him to safety while covered them, her armor cracked and sparking. She was wounded in 3 places, blood mixing with sweat inside her helmet. Hours passed. Reinforcements did not come, but did not stop fighting. When the sun finally rose over Sanctuary Prime, Sergeant was still standing. Her armor was destroyed, hanging off her body in pieces. Her weapons were gone. She held a combat knife in one hand and a broken swarm mandible in the other. Around her lay the bodies of hundreds of swarm soldiers. Behind her, the hospital doors opened, and Admiral Myra herself walked through. Myra looked at the carnage, at the single soldier who had held an impossible position through an impossible night. She had seen many brave things in her career, nothing compared to this. "Sergeant," Myra said quietly, "stand down. Reinforcements have arrived. The swarm is retreating." Blinked as if waking from a dream. "The children." "Safe, all of them, because of you." Finally let herself fall. Admiral Myra caught her before she hit the ground. The battle for Sanctuary Prime was not over yet, but in that moment they both knew that the worst was behind them. In orbit, the swarm fleet was breaking apart. They had thrown everything at the humans, and it had not been enough. Ship after ship turned and fled, leaving the planet they had tried to consume. They, for the first time in its existence, had ordered a retreat. Admiral watched the enemy flee and felt no joy. Too many good people had died today. The cost of victory was measured in blood and sacrifice. But they had won. Against all odds, humanity had won. 3 days after the Battle of Sanctuary Prime, the dead were still being counted. 247 human ships had been destroyed. 89,000 soldiers, pilots, and crew members would never return home. It was the costliest battle in human history, and yet every survivor agreed they would do it again without hesitation. On the planet's surface, the work of healing began. Human engineers helped repair power systems. Human medics treated wounded alongside their own. Human soldiers handed out food and water to refugees, their armored hands gentle with the fragile bird-like aliens. Admiral walked through the ruins of the capital city with High Arbiter at his side. The leader moved slowly, still weak from days without rest or food. But he insisted on seeing everything, on understanding what had happened to his world and who had saved it. They stopped at the hospital that Sergeant had defended. The walls were with weapons fire. The ground was stained dark with blood, both human and swarm. But the building still stood, and inside, children laughed and played as if the nightmare had never happened. "I do not understand," said softly, watching a human soldier teach a group of children some kind of game. "You came from so far away. You lost so many of your own people. Why? What did we offer you? What could we possibly give in return?" Was quiet for a long moment. He thought about how to explain something that was, to him, very simple but seemed impossible for others to understand. "There is a story from he said finally. "A long time ago, before humans reached the stars, there was a disaster. Thousands of people were trapped, dying. Other nations could have helped, but they calculated the cost and decided it was too high. They watched and did nothing." He paused, his old eyes distant with memory. But some people did not calculate. They simply went. They risked their lives, spent their resources, and saved whoever they could. When asked why, they said something that has stayed with my people ever since. What did they say? They said that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats those who are useful to it, but how it treats those who need help and can offer nothing in return. Stared at the Admiral for a long time. In his many years of dealing with galactic politics, he had never heard any species say such a thing. Every relationship was built on trade, on mutual benefit, on careful calculation of advantage. The idea of helping simply because it was right seemed almost childish. And yet here he stood, surrounded by the evidence that humans actually believed it. "Your galaxy calls you monsters," said. "Yes. They fear you. They lock you away behind quarantine lines." "Yes. They teach their children that are dangerous animals that must be contained." Nodded slowly. "They are not entirely wrong. We are dangerous. Our forged us in fire and death. We evolved to survive things that would destroy most species. But being dangerous is not the same as being evil. A weapon can protect as easily as it can harm. It depends on who holds it. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Federation convened an emergency session. Representatives from 300 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall to discuss what had happened at Sanctuary Prime. The atmosphere was tense. Many delegates were angry that humans had violated quarantine, crossed borders without permission, and deployed weapons that were technically banned. The human delegation sat in the section marked Observers Only, as they always had. They were not full members of the Federation and had no voice in its deliberations. Admiral led them, his uniform still showing the burns and tears from the battle. Beside him sat Admiral Myra, captain, and who had been promoted for her role in receiving and spreading the distress signal. For hours, delegates argued. Some demanded that humans be punished for their violations. Others suggested that the quarantine should be strengthened, that they had proven themselves too dangerous to be trusted. A few quietly admitted that the humans had done what the Federation should have done, but they were shouted down. Then High Arbiter rose to speak. He walked slowly to the central platform, his gray feathers catching the light. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what had happened to his world, and everyone wanted to hear what he would say. "You call them monsters," began, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the hall. "You lock them away because they're dangerous, because their bodies are strong, because their instincts are those of predators. You fear what they might do, so you condemn them for what they are." He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "But when my world burned, when 4 billion of my people faced extinction, what did you do? You calculated costs. You measured benefits. You wrote reports and filed them away. You left us to die." His voice grew stronger, filled with emotion he could not contain. "And then the monsters came, not to conquer us, not to consume us, to save us. They crossed your borders, broke your rules, and threw themselves into fire for people they had never met." Tears rolled down his face, dampening his feathers. "I watched their soldiers die protecting our children. I watched their pilots sacrifice themselves to destroy enemy command ships. I watched them weep over our dead as if they were their own families." He turned to face the human delegation directly. "If these are monsters, then the galaxy needs more of them. If this is what do, then I thank whatever gods exist that they heard our cry." The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates shouted in anger, others in agreement, but was not finished. "The hereby request that the human quarantine be lifted. We request that humans be granted full membership in the Galactic Federation, and we pledge that wherever humanity goes, they will stand beside them. This is our debt, and we will spend the rest of our existence repaying it." The vote that followed was the closest in Federation history. It took 3 months of debate, negotiation, and political maneuvering. But in the end, the quarantine was lifted. Humans were allowed to travel freely for the first time in a century. Admiral did not live to see the full results of that change. He passed away peacefully 2 years later, surrounded by his family and friends. But before he died, he received a gift that he treasured above all his medals and honors. It was a painting created by the children of the hospital that Sargent had defended. It showed a human soldier, drawn in bright colors with a child's simple skill, standing between flames and a group of small birds. The human was smiling, arms spread wide, protecting the birds from the fire. Beneath the image, written in both script and translated to human language, were 2 words: "Not monsters." 10 years after the Battle of Sanctuary Prime, human ships could be found throughout the galaxy. They guarded trade routes against pirates. They provided disaster relief when worlds faced natural catastrophes. They trained other species in defense and helped mediate conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve. And whenever a distress signal went out, whenever someone somewhere cried for help, they answered. They always would. Because that was what it meant to be human, not just dangerous but good, not just strong but kind, not just survivors but protectors. The galaxy had feared them for what they were. Now it respected them for what they chose to be. Guardians.